All right, Hosea 2, verse 2. Plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her, I just lost my place. Lest, I don't have it memorized, lest I strip her naked and set her as in the day that she was born, and make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. And I will not have mercy upon her. We've heard that before her, mercy upon her children, for they be children of whoredoms. Wow. Now, of course, this is a picture of Israel. God has set this whole thing up so that he's doing a demonstration to the nation of what they've become to him. The events of Exodus and Numbers are going to happen again, and they're going to have to go into the wilderness, and they're going to have to go through some more training and trials and tribulations in order for God to purge them. Look at Hosea 4, verse 14. This is one of the worst punishments God can do. I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your spouses when they commit adultery. For themselves are separated with whores, and they sacrifice with harlots. Therefore the people that doth not understand shall fall. One of the worst things God could do is not speedily correct us, because we'll continue on in more and more wickedness, thinking we got away with it. I heard a psychologist the other day saying, now he didn't know any Bible, and he's probably not saved, but he keyed in on something. Now his terminology was all wrong, but that's okay. He said, well, the one thing that he's learned in life that is really scary is you never get away with anything. You cannot, he said, people think they can warp the fabric of society. Now, of course, that's the wrong way to word it. You can't break God's laws, what he should have said, and get away with it. He says they think they do because nothing seems to happen, and then on down the line something tragic happens and they think that happened out of nowhere. He said, no, it didn't happen out of nowhere. You messed it up way back here and it's finally rippled out. That's true, but he didn't have his terminology right. It's because of sin. Right. Now, if God doesn't punish us quickly or reprimand us, get us back on track, we just complicate things. We just blow it up into a bigger and bigger problem. And that's what he's saying here. I'll do this. Here's the worst punishment I can do to your children. I'll just leave my hands off and see how big a mess they can make. Right. And then I'll come down there. And that's what he's done to the nation. Look at Psalm 78. Psalm 78, verse 1. Psalm 78, 1. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generations to come the praise of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he hath done. That's what they should have been doing, but they weren't. Verse 5. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers that they should make them known to their children, that the generations to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children. The problem is it broke down somewhere. We know by reading the book of Judges right where it broke down. After Joshua leaves the scene, they say, good, the hall monitor's gone. We can get away with whatever we want. And that's what they did. And God began punishing at that point. They got a little clue, and David comes along and gives them a little reprieve. And that's about the only hot spot we get. Then it goes downhill again. Solomon comes in. He's mediocre for a little while. And then it runs right downhill until we're right here. Here we are in Hosea. Hosea 2, look at verse 15. Hosea 2:15. Israel is going to have to go through a time that reverts them back to the days that got them clean to begin with. They had to go through Egypt's punishments. They had to go through wandering in the wilderness. And finally they started looking up. They're going to have to do that again. Hosea 2:15. And I will give her her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor, you know what that is? That's Achan, for a door of hope. And she shall sing there as in the days of her youth, and as in the days when she came up out of the land of Egypt. So she's going to go right back through all the same troubles and torment. You know, the problem with man is this. We go through trouble, God intends it to teach us something. But if we don't learn the lesson, the trouble just, he does this. He turns the volume up. He thinks, well, but they didn't hear it. Let me turn the volume up. And if we don't learn it, the volume just destroys us.
Yes.
And that's the nation here. Look at Ezekiel 36. Ezekiel 36:24. Ezekiel 36:24. Here's the promise. God's done something special with the nation of Israel. He's not done with any other nation. He said, I'm going to make a special covenant with Abraham. And then he repeated it with all the patriarchs that come after. So they get something special. They're going to be redeemed as a nation. Ezekiel 36:24. For I will take you from among the heathen. Well, they're going to have to be scattered among the heathen first. And gather you out of all countries, and will bring you into your own land. Okay, they have their own land. That's been identified. But there's another scattering yet to come. When the Antichrist shows up, he's going to scatter them again. They're going to have to jump down from the rooftop and start running. Remember all that? They're going to scatter. God says there's coming a day that I'll put you back in that land and ain't nobody going to take you out. Now that's the way this book is going to end. Now we're going to go through some tough times in this book until we get the high point. But fortunately there is a happy ending. Hosea 2, look at verse 20. Hosea 2, verse 20. I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness. Whew, that's a good thing. Hosea's wife was not faithful. He said that's the picture of the nation. The nation's been acting like this. They've not been faithful to God. God says there's coming a day that I'll remarry you, and you'll be married in faithfulness. Amen. The nation will finally turn around. Now he's going to do some miraculous things to do it. And thou shalt know the Lord. But unfortunately, we've got to go through the meantime, the training, the reprimand. Numbers chapter 5. Numbers 5, verse 20. Numbers 5, verse 20. Most people don't realize this passage is in the Bible. It's here. Numbers, Leviticus, some of those heavy books, people don't realize the gold mine that's in there, but there's a lot in there. Numbers 5, verse 20. But if thou hast gone aside to another instead of thy husband, Israel did, and if thou be defiled, and some man have lain with thee beside thine husband, then the priest shall charge the woman with an oath of cursing. And the priest shall say unto the woman, the Lord make thee a curse and an oath among the people, when the Lord doth make thy thigh to rot and thy belly to swell. Now, there's the whole, I'm not going to read you the whole passage. The whole passage here, now you know where it is. You can go home and study it. What happens is, if a husband suspects his wife's been stepping out on him, he goes, brings her in before the priest, and they mixed some water and some dust from the floor of the tabernacle. And she has to drink this thing. And if she truly had been stepping out, these curses would come on her. If not, it would be harmless. Now, God doesn't have to go through all that rigmarole. With the nation of Israel, he knows, and he's got infallible proof of it. However, all this is going to happen to them. Their thigh is going to rot in their belly, and all that stuff's going to happen to them as a nation. Now, not physically, but as a nation. Look at, my computer's decided to do something crazy. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 16. Ezekiel 16, verse 15. Here God explains it in no uncertain terms. Ezekiel 16, verse 15. It says, but thou didst trust in thine own beauty. Okay, that's our problem. We think we became something. We preached that this morning. You're nothing. Sorry, that sounds a little too much like Joel Osteen, doesn't it? But the fact of the matter is we aren't anything. Now, God will make us something.
Right.
But the second he does, don't confuse that with something you did.
That's right.
And that's what Israel did. Israel said, hey, we're somebody. Look at this. No, that was God's making. Okay, thine own beauty, and playedest the harlot because of thy renown, and pouredest out thy fornication on it. Every one that passed by, his it was. And of thy garments thou didst take, and deckest thy high places with divers colors, and played the harlot thereupon. The like thing shall not come, neither shall it be so. He says, you've been taking everything I've been giving you, and you're advertising yourself on the high places. 17, thou also takest thy fair jewels. Well, where do you think she got those? God. She took this gold and this silver, which I had given thee, and madest to thyself images of men, and didst commit whoredom with them. He says you made some images. You made up some gods out of the stuff I gave you. Now, he doesn't take that too kindly. Look at verse 23. And it come to pass after all thy wickedness. Now, this is something you find in Revelation. Woe, woe unto thee, saith the Lord. There's going to be 3 woes at the end. You can find it on the chart there. 3 woes. Here's 2 of them right here. Woe, woe. And their woes are going to be fulfilled. Verse 27. Behold, therefore, I have stretched out my hand over thee, and have diminished thine ordinary food. That is, no McDonald's. Isn't that ordinary food? No. That's not food. That's right. He says, now this is one of the worst things that can happen. It's already begun to happen. We hadn't realized it, but our food doesn't have the nutrients it used to. What we're eating, thinking that it's giving us strength, is not doing anything. It's like eating popcorn. I never liked eating popcorn. My dad always liked to eat popcorn at the end of the night. That didn't make it. Give me a steak or something, but popcorn, that means nothing. But he says that's the way your food's going to be. It's going to have nothing to it. Diminish your ordinary food, and delivered thee unto the will of them that hate thee. Now, that's Israel. As long as I've been alive, as far back as I can remember them being a people, they have been persecuted and hated of all people. Now, that's a fulfillment of God saying, I'm going to punish you as a nation. The daughters of the Philistines, which are ashamed of thy lewd ways. Whew. See, I skipped something. Deliver thee unto the will of them that hate thee. The daughters of the Philistines, which are ashamed of thy lewd ways. That is, even the world is going to look at Israel and say, you're just being wicked. Wow. Now, we can take a lesson from that. Basically, this is a doctrinal thing tonight. However, the practical side of that is this. Any Christian can fall into the same mess. And if a Christian doesn't do right, he'll end up being worse than the world around him. Ezekiel 16, look at verse 35. Wherefore, O harlot, hear the word of the Lord. What a way to talk to somebody. He's talking to a nation. He's saying, just that our prime example is Hosea. Hosea had to take a wife. That was the display. I would rather have Ezekiel's job. Well, until he had to eat dung. I would have.
Yeah, really.
I would have rather been the prophet preaching in Ezekiel than have to be Hosea.
Yeah.
God put some hard things on his people. He said, verse 35, Wherefore, O harlot, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God, because thy filthiness was poured out, and thy nakedness discovered through thy whoredoms with thy lovers, and with all the idols of thy abominations, and by the blood of thy children, which thou didst give unto them. Now, maybe it's a nice way they gave their children to them, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think what he's talking about here is Moloch, where they burned them.
Yeah.
They offered them as a sacrifice. You know, the thing that was probably Solomon's downfall? All of his pagan wives had him worshiping all the pagan supposed gods, and most of them had a child sacrifice. With as many concubines and wives as he had, we should have 4 books of Yeah, children that he had, but we don't. Now we do have a few, but not enough. Ezekiel 16, look at verse 38. And I will judge thee as woman that breaketh wedlock. We found the woman that breaketh wedlock in Numbers. And shed blood are judged. As women that break wedlock and shed blood are judged. So God says, I consider murder to be on the same plane as breaking wedlock. Wow. He's serious about it. And I will give thee blood in fury and jealousy. Wow. And I will also give thee into their hands, and they shall throw down thine intimate places, and shall break down thy high places. They shall strip thee also of thy clothes, and shall take thy fair jewels, and leave thee naked and bare. So they're going to come in and take everything you got. And they did. You remember Hezekiah showed off he said, come on in, take a look around, see how good we are. And he didn't give God any of the praise for that. And he didn't ask God if he could. The prophet says, I tell you what, you're going to lose all that. He says, now, it'll be after you're dead and gone. And then, you know what his calloused response was? Well, that's great, because there'll be peace in my time. Wow. That's the train of thought that was going on. Ezekiel 23, look at verse 4. Ezekiel 23, verse 4. The nation as a whole, God likes to use illustrations of actual people. Ezekiel 23, verse 4. Here's another time that something's used similar to what was going on with Hosea. And the names of them were Aholah, the elder, and Aholibamah, her sister. And they were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were the names. Samaria is Aholah, and Jerusalem Aholibamah. Not the Obama we know, but maybe. Verse 22. Ezekiel 23, 22. Therefore Aholibamah, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will raise up thy lovers against thee. What you thought were your buddies are going to turn against you. There is no honor amongst thieves. To be a thief means you're selfish to begin with. Okay? So if all you got is a bunch of thieves, they start stealing from each other. Okay, that's the nation. The only way you get any kind of peace is from the Prince of Peace. Otherwise, you've got anarchy. And, well, what the Antichrist is going to bring. From whom thy maid is alienated, and I will bring them against thee on every side. Now, I'm sure that history has shown us pictures of that. But the final time this is going to happen is in the tribulation. And all nations are going to be gathered against Israel. And God says, I'm going to arrange it so they do it just like I want them to. And then I'm going to come down there and squish them all at once. Ezekiel 23, look at verse 25. And I will set my jealousy against thee. Third time we've seen it. And they shall deal furiously with thee. They shall take away thy nose and thine ears. Wow. That's like leprosy. You know, the lepers, their appendages start falling off. And thy raiment shall fall by the sword. Remnant shall fall by the sword. They shall take thy sons and thy daughters, and thy residue shall be devoured by the fire. There is fire coming in the tribulation. And that's just a warm, no pun intended, that's a warm-up for where they end up, the lake of fire. Look at Hosea 2, verse 5. Look at that, we made it through 2 verses already.
All right.
Hosea 2, verse 5. Hosea 2, 5. For their mother hath played the harlot, she that conceiveth them hath done shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers that gave me my bread, my water, my wool, my flax, mine oil, and my drink. A little too many my's up in there.
Yeah.
If somebody had to give it to her, why is she claiming it's my?
Yeah.
Okay. Her charity, she means. Hosea 2, look at verse 5. Hosea 2, verse 5. Their mother hath played the harlot. It's over and over through here. Now, we've seen that God considers that on the same plane as murder. And he's going to punish for it. America has got some punishment due. There's been a bunch of babies murdered. Right. And blood has to be avenged by blood. So it's coming. Hopefully we'll be out of here when it lands, but you never know. James chapter 1. James 1, verse 14. The problem is most of the abortions that have gone on in America are due to one reason. They weren't married, so it wasn't a blessing. Adultery, fornication, the same subjects we're dealing with in the book of Hosea. And in the book of Hosea, God just dealt with the adultery and the fornication. In America, we've done the adultery and the fornication and the murder. James 1, verse 14. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, like a child, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Well, God's going to levy some death pretty soon. Revelation chapter 2. See how this ends up for the nation of Israel. Revelation 2, verse 20. This is going to take place at the beginning of the tribulation. Revelation 2, verse 20. He's talking to one of the churches that are in the tribulation. Nevertheless, notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. It's a religious thing. Now that's the pagan worship. The pagan worship was not only to worship some made-up god and mysticism, but also the adultery and the fornication went right with it. Verse 21. And I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation. They'll get to go through the next 3.5 years, except they repent of their deeds. And I will kill her children with death. How else did you think you were going to die? This death is death and hell that rides in on the pale horse. And that's going to be a personal death. And all the churches shall know that I am he which searcheth the reins and the hearts, and I will give unto every one of you according to your works. Oof. That's where it ends up. Hosea is trying to warn them on the front end, but they're not listening. Hosea, look at chapter 9. Hosea 9, verse 10. Hosea 9, verse 10, he points out a time that they were adulterous. Now, we know we can see the physical part plainly, but that's just a type. That's a picture of what God was seeing in the spirit realm. So here's the spirit realm. Hosea 9, verse 10. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as the first ripe of the fig tree at her first time. But they went to Baal Peor and separated themselves unto that shame. There's that shame again. And their abominations were according as they loved. One of the hardest things to do is realize you can control what you like. Don't let your heart dictate to you what you like. That's right. The heart's just going to love what it's going to... No. The mind's going to tell the heart what it can love.
Yeah, that's right.
He said right here, they did according as they loved. Well, their love was way wrong. Jeremiah 11. Jeremiah 11, verse 13. Jeremiah 11, 13. For according to the number of thy cities were thy gods, O Judah, and according to the number of the streets of Jerusalem have they set up altars to that shameful thing, even altars to burn incense unto Baal. You look at that and you think, who is he talking about? That's Jerusalem. Kind of like it is right now over there. Right now, you can go over there and find every religion. And you can just count on it. God's not going to put up with that. That's his land. He's told them over and over, if you don't act right on my land, I kick you off. And the next time he kicks them off is with a steel-toe boot. It's going to hurt. Jeremiah 44. Jeremiah 44, verse 17. Jeremiah comes in, preaches the same sermon. Get right, it's coming, bad news. And here's the answer from the people. Jeremiah 44, 17. But we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth. You can't tell me what to do. To burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we, our fathers, our kings, our princes, in the city of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then, they're connecting things that don't match. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well, and saw no evil. No, those victuals weren't from the heathen. They were from God. The heathen don't control the rain. They don't control the harvest. I know the Indians like to do a rain dance, but the mercy of God is what caused it to rain. Not your dancing and prancing. Verse 18. But since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, we have wanted all things, and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. Guess what? You got some punishment due. This is presumptuous on their part. They said, okay, we tried reforming one time, we told God we were sorry, and then we didn't get better all of a sudden. Well, he's not a genie you rub and get whatever you want. When you do wrong, repentance means you're willing to suffer for the wrong you did. It means you recognize you deserve punishment. Well, they did deserve punishment. They were about to get some good stuff, but they didn't heed. They weren't serious about it. Israel went after her lovers because of this material wealth. But now, wealth is an illusion usually, because the man who's pulling the strings that tells you it's wealth has a hook attached to it, and he likes slaves. A man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. Go find the rich people. They're not happy. You're much better off being poor and content. Now, there's plenty of poor people that are just as miserable as the rich people. The key is contentment. If you can be satisfied with what you got, you're in good shape. Now, only a Christian can. However, it doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank. If your eye's on money, you're never going to be happy. Israel tried to make friends with people God had already declared were his enemy. And when you line up with God's enemy, you go down when they do. And that's Israel. 1 Kings 22. 1 Kings 22, verse 1. And they continued 3 years without war between Syria and Israel. Sounds like good times. And it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said unto his servants, Know ye that Ramoth in Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of the king of Syria. He said, see what he's saying here? For 3 years, we've not had any war with Syria. I'm getting bored. Let's go back up there and start something. That's what he's doing. He's saying, I don't want to do it by myself. Let's go pull my long-lost brother into it too. Talk about wickedness. Verse 4. And he said unto Jehoshaphat, Wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, I am as thou art. My people is thy people. My horses is thy horses. You want to bet? Well, if they are, they're going down just like his will. And they did. Israel's prosperity, and all of ours, any person who has prosperity, it's due to one thing, God allowing it. Sometimes he allows prosperity to destroy you. That's what happened to Israel. In their most prosperous time, you recognize that's when Jeroboam II was in power. And that's where they go downhill real quick. Right after that, they start making contracts with all the heathens. And that's where prosperity can change our viewpoint. Instead of looking at God, if we don't need to look to God for our daily provisions and meals and money and all that junk that we got to have, if we're not looking to Him for it, and we've got plenty of money and plenty of provisions, what do we need Him for? That's the way we turn into. That's what Israel did. Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28 verse 12. Deuteronomy 28 verse 12. We can all become charismatics on this verse. Not really. I wish. This is written to a nation, and they had a special promise. God promised the nation of Israel health, wealth, and long life if they would obey Him. Now that sounds like a good deal, but the obedience was hard. So they said, let's throw that out. We're enjoying some health and some wealth already. Well, it won't last. Deuteronomy 28 verse 12. The Lord shall open unto thee His good treasures, the heaven to give thee rain, to give rain unto thy land in His seasons, and to bless all the work of thine hand. And thou shalt lend unto many nations. You're going to be so rich you can hand out money. And thou shalt not borrow. You don't need to borrow any money. You got so much money you don't know what to do with it. Wow. I'll sign up for that one. Maybe. Verse 13. And the Lord shall make thee the head and not the tail. That is, you are going to be the center of the earth. You're going to be nation number one. And everybody else will be coming to you. Kind of the position America has been in for many, many years. But I think it's slipping. He says, and thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath. If thou shalt hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day to observe, to do them. All of it sounded good until we got to one word: commandments. Command? You can't tell me something to do. That's what happened to Israel. That's what we're reading in Hosea. Is Hosea, we better stop it there. Hosea has told the people, look, you've broke the deal. The contract you tore up. So what God's going to do is He's going to punish for it. Now, the mercy of God is in this book, but it's going to be hard to find until we get toward the end. What we're going to find is God punishes. He always punishes for sin. So, when you can identify a sin, get rid of it quickly so it doesn't compound. Then He does this in the book. He says, look, I've not given up on you, and I'm going to come back after you. That's what He does with Hosea. He makes Hosea go back and go retrieve this unfaithful wife. It's what God does to the nation. All right, just so I could end on a happy note, I told you all that stuff. Okay, we'll pick it up there next week, Hosea 2, verse 6.